Hello, everybody. See a few new faces. How are you? What's your name? Avram. Avram and Yishayahu. Anybody knows my friend Mordechai, right? I know Mordechai from the cradle. Before the cradle. As usual, we take this opportunity to speak about the Pasha of the week, and then to draw something from it for ourselves, something that would help us in understanding our own path and our own avodah. And again, anyone who has a difficulty, doesn't understand something, a word or something, please stop me, and I will be glad to go back and make sure that everybody understands. The Pasha is Pasha's Matoss, as I'm sure you all know. And the Pasha begins with the mitzvah of Nedorim, vows, and oaths, neder and shvuah. The real central theme of the Pasha, even though it says right in the beginning that when a person makes a neder, he has to keep his vow. But that is the end of this obligatory part, that he has to keep his vow. Everything else speaks about how to nullify the vow.
What do you mean nullify?
To invalidate, to take it off. A vow makes you obligated to do something, to take the obligation off. And there are certain principles that the Chachomim, the sages, have drawn out of the Pasha, but that are not mentioned in the Pasha at all. But there is a hint, there are some different ways that the Chachomim have drawn it, and many of them are really something which is b'Kabbalah. It's called Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. That Moshe himself taught us orally, and we know this principle. And all have to do with the nullification, the removal of the vow and the oath. Apparently, just as it is important to understand that when a person makes a vow, he must keep his vow. And the expression in the Pasuk is Lo Yachel Dvoroi. And Rashi says, what does Yachel mean? He should not profane, he should not make it chulin. Chulin means to consider it arbitrary, unimportant, choil, mundane. Appreciate it. Take me along. Apparently, when a person takes a vow, it immediately involves something of kedusha. His word actually affects an aspect of kedusha, of holiness, and therefore, lo yachil dvorei. You should not consider it mundane. Should not ignore it, whereby he makes his words mundane.
What if you forget what you vowed?
If you forget, if you vowed, there are many halachas associated with vows, many halachas associated with every din in the Torah. And generally speaking, we have a custom Erev Rosh Hashanah to invalidate all vows that we may have made inadvertently during the year, unintentionally, unawares. My dear friend, we can talk about it, but this is not the intent of the discussion. Okay. So it seems that even as keeping your vow, not profaning it, is obligatory, because your words have an effect, a holy effect. Similarly, the Torah engages in a long discussion as to how to nullify the vow, so that nullification of the vow is also seems to be part of Avodas Hashem. One would think that to remove a vow means to remove an obligation, to free yourself up, and to go back and, so to speak, into the mundane world. That is not Avodas Hashem. And yet, it does seem from this whole discussion in the Pasuk that there is a whole process of how to nullify the vow. The father, the husband, the Rav, even though the Rav is not mentioned, but Rosh Matoss, the heads of the tribes, are mentioned because they have the power also to remove the vow. And this, we want to discuss, focusing on the significance of the vow and the meaning of removing of the vow.
The movement?
Removing.
Oh, removing.
Generally, the function and the purpose of a vow, when the person issues a vow responsibly, the purpose of that is to help him control and guide himself in his actions. When one sees that he is being drawn into some involvement, some form of action, or he's being too deeply involved in something, and he wants to extricate, free himself from it, so he vows. This vow gives him the strength to overcome his temptation, because he recognizes the severity, the seriousness of a vow, and that gives him the strength to overcome and not to indulge in whatever it is that he is being drawn into. This general aspect of what's called protection clearly does not refer to actions that are primarily forbidden from the Torah. Because if it's asur, the Torah already declares that it's forbidden, and you don't need any greater support. The Torah already says it's forbidden. The way the Gemara expresses it, the Gemara says, Mushba v'oimed mehar Sinai. We all have been issued, administered a vow, an oath ad Har Sinai, to accept the Torah. And therefore there cannot be any greater force, strength in support of that. Therefore we're talking about something that is essentially permissible, but for some reason he decides that this is something which he wants to stay away from, and he knows that has a weakness to it, he may not be able to, and therefore he issues a vow. And then comes the Chacham, and he removes the vow, he nullifies the vow. First, let us discuss the vow itself. What is the meaning? Something that's permissible. I'm allowed to eat whatever food that I like if it's kosher. And everyone's appetite is different. Everyone's tastes are different. So why should I not indulge myself? Why should I not allow it to go in its natural path? The answer is that I myself realize that even though I really like this food and I'm really drawn to it, I actually possess means I have a neshama. I have a spiritual insight, a spiritual power, a spiritual capability that is really above this particular desire. I should not want it. Recognizing who I am, recognizing what I'm able to do, recognizing what a human being is in general, what a Yid is in particular, and what a Yid, a Shomer Torah Mitzvah, who serves Hashem, what kind of capability, what kind of power he has. And therefore, I feel that this is inappropriate for me. In other words, at the same time, when I'm being drawn to it, and I want it, I realize that that's not really me. Somehow I got involved, and I have a habit, and I'm being drawn to it from whatever experience that I've had, and I'm not able to stay away, but it's not really me. My real self is way above that. How do I get that real self of mine, that real spiritual strength, that insight, that purity? How do I get that out to the surface? How do I rise to it? How do I rise to it? And therefore I go and I vow. The vow is not just to torture oneself. The vow is not to take revenge. The vow is not to accomplish the impossible. These are all foolish things. The vow has a very determined, meaningful idea behind it. Somebody who foolishly goes out and tortures himself, this is not a Torah way at all. Lahavdil, we should never know about it. We should never. Lahavdil, Elav Havdolis. Elav Havdolis means something which is completely not in our realm. Lahavdil, but the Goyim, the Oivdei Avodah Zorah, the idol worshippers. By them, it was a whole determinant factor in life to inflict pain upon themselves. They considered that a means of getting the favor from their idols, from their of natural powers that they worshipped. We don't subscribe to that at all.
I understand there's a difference, but how do you differentiate between that and like Segufim and the Perishim? What's the difference?
Well, this is what I'm trying to explain, and the way this is the point. Okay. We don't subscribe to that at all. The Rambam, who is the teacher, the Rebbe says, of all Yidden, clearly states that the guf, the body, should be healthy, is midarke Hashem. On the contrary, that itself is a derech Hashem. That itself is an avodas Hashem. Avodah means service, doing Hashem's thing, Hashem's will. Every Yid, by his very presence, represents a godly presence. Can you imagine when a godly presence manifests itself? Manifests, everybody understand that? Shows itself in a tortured and a painful way. How praiseworthy, how great is that to the God that they represent? There's nothing beautiful about that. So that whole path of, that whole thought process is totally strange to us. What we do recognize and we do value and what we do encourage and find ways to accomplish is to bring out our spiritual powers, our spiritual insights, our spiritual purity, the purity of our soul, which sometimes is hidden because of our physical environment. In order to reveal that, we have to contain our physical environment. But that is done only in a very judicious, measured manner, and very momentary, very limited and very temporary, until one feels that he is broken through. The Rebbe Rashab, everybody knows the Rebbe Rashab, that's the Frierdiker Rebbe's father in Lubavitch. He was once from Brengen, and he said that if someone wants to eat something, and then he determines that this is just really accommodating his Yetzer Hara, there's no, he's not eating it for a health purpose or anything, it's just to indulge. And he decides, I'm not going to eat it. And then he says, the Rebbe says, and he actually doesn't eat it. He doesn't just at this point says, I'm not going to, pushes it away, but he actually fulfills his intent that he doesn't eat it. So the Rebbe says, that person we're not worried about. What does it mean we're not worried about? He is in control of himself. He has a sense of his neshama. He has a sense of life. He has a sense of his spiritual insights. Sometimes a person says, I wished I could stay away from it, but I can't. So he says, I'm not going to eat it, but let me just taste it. And then, of course, he's back where he started. In other words, the point here is not the abstention and the pain. The point here is what is intended, what is accomplished, what is gained by this. Because spirituality, godliness, and physicality, in terms of being pursued as intentionally, are contradictory. We have to, in order to combine the two, one has to know that he has to pursue physicality for the purpose of spirituality, in order to maintain a healthy body so he can do mitzvahs. But to pursue it in its own purpose, in its own right, for its own sake, they're contradictory. It doesn't go together. And it doesn't go together to such an extent that the more one indulges in physical satisfaction, the less he's capable of appreciating a spiritual thought. The less it touches him. It comes to a point where you explain to him something very significant, very deep, very meaningful. And he says, I see what you're saying. It doesn't mean anything to me. What does it mean it doesn't mean anything to me? It doesn't reach my world. My world is what we call real. It's tangible. It has to be physical. And if it's not physical, it's not real. But that's not the case. Every person has a neshama. And he is definitely capable not only of understanding something which is higher than the physical, but even to relate to it and appreciate it and want it and live with it. That's what a neshama is. Neshama elokis, a godly neshama.
Is there a difference between spirituality and godliness?
Yes. Again, this is a topic which is outside of the scope of this. But you could say that spirituality is a step towards understanding godliness. Godliness is a much higher principle than spirituality. On the other hand, godliness, you can relate to godliness to doing a physical mitzvah. So it's a totally different thing. So here is where the principle of the oath, of the vow, comes in. What should be the normal path of a person? When a person is in control of himself, is in possession of himself. So normally, he doesn't need a vow. Doesn't have to make it forbidden. Says, I don't need this, and therefore, I'm not going to do it. In other words, it's what's called self-control. He doesn't need any aids, any help to abstain from that which is not purposeful, it's not meaningful to him. That's normal. When a person finds that this is not enough, that he is losing the battle, so he makes a vow to extricate himself, to break away from the imprisonment, so to speak, of the Gashmi, where he feels that's impossible. If I want it, then I'm bound to do it. So he can extricate himself from this by this vow. But then there is what's called the nullification of the vow. In the realm of nullification of the vow, there are two types. As you've learned, there is when the father nullifies the vow, which is only possible to a girl, to a young girl. And then when a father or husband, and then there is where the Chacham, where the Rav, or the Nasi HaShevet, what's called Rosh in Matoss, he nullifies the vow. And there's a difference in how that is accomplished. Again, I'm sure you learned the Rashi. One is called Haforas Nedorim, the other is called Hatoras Nedorim. Haforas Nedorim means to break the vow in the middle. Hatoras Nedorim means to render it permissible to begin with. Also mutter. From a Hasidus perspective, and the perspective of Avodas Hashem, these represent two levels of nullification of the vow. A person finds himself in need of a vow, and then, after having gone through that experience, then he comes to a point where it's time to break the vow. In other words, not to vow anymore. That's called Haforas Neder. Why? Because now he has come to a point where he is in control of himself, and he will be able to guide himself and not fall, not be drawn under control of the physical interest. He'll be able to control himself. So he doesn't need a vow anymore. The vow served its purpose. Now he don't need it anymore. That's called Haforas Neder. Then there is another level. The other level is called Hatoras Neder, Mutter. Mutter is a different concept altogether. Mutter simply means, in simple terms, that a person is in such a level that everything that he does automatically is l'shem shamayim, has a holy and a godly significance to it. So when he eats, he is not eating to satisfy his body. He's eating to elevate this Michael, this food, to a godly status and to reveal the godliness that's in this Michael. So for him, not only does he not need a vow, but as a matter of fact, he should not make a vow, because he should not abstain from this food, because the food needs him to be elevated. I'm sorry?
What this means that you say, Rabbi, that the person before go to eat, goes to eat, the person is put kavana before eat, or is it the other way? When you say this? Because
this last madrega is the madrega of a tzaddik. A tzaddik is not drawn to the gashmi to begin with. He's not drawn to the physical. He is drawn to the godly spark that's in the food. And therefore by him, the whole concept of vows certainly does not apply in the first place. Because everything that he does in the physical world has a godly significance. What does all this tell us? Like I mentioned before, the concept of inflicting discomfort, pain of any kind is totally outside the realm of Torah. It's also. And the Torah specifically states certain things that the Goyim used to do that the Torah says this is absolutely forbidden, like cutting up in one's flesh and all kinds of different things that they used to do. It's also up to Torah. But then within normal realm, also there are these two levels. One who is able to control himself, one who that shouldn't control himself, because his deed is really a holy deed to start with. What all this is telling us is that even though we are here in a physical world, and the physical world seems to conceal godliness, seems to draw us in a direction that is opposite of Torah. But that is only a superficial aspect of the world. That is not the real reality. The real truth of the world is that this is a godly world, this is God's world. And everything in the world represents really a godly spark, a godly presence. And it is both our duty, our privilege, and our ability to recognize the godliness in the world. Sometimes, in order to get to that, we have to go through a process of vows, abstention, so that we don't get drawn into the world for the wrong reasons. But we have to know that ultimately we do want to get involved. We do want to build. We do want to recognize in the world and its godliness. And how is this possible? This is possible for both. Number one, because not number one, in no particular order, because the world has a godly spark in it, and because we have a godly neshama. This inyan, that we have a godly neshama, and that our effort is in all our controls and all our training, is not only to train to be acting correctly, and all our learning and training is ultimately to reach up and to recognize and to understand and to come to grips with the godly concept. This is the most important thing. And this is how we rise, and this is the real inyan of Eretz Hashem. So in answer to you, Noach, about Shigufim, it's exactly this thing. The inyan of Shigufim is only when a person determines that he has some aspects that he cannot extricate himself, he cannot free himself, because he is so deeply entrenched in Gashmius. In order to disengage, sometimes he has to resort to Sigufim. Sigufim by themselves do not accomplish anything. One has to know clearly where he is at and what he's trying to accomplish and what he's trying to break through. There is a story, I think, I remember correctly, once, maybe one of the years I mentioned this story. The story of the Abta Rov. It was a big Rebbe from the Abta. And somebody came to him with a complaint. He said he found in Sforim from Kabbalah, that if somebody goes through a month of Tainis Hadibur. Tainis Hadibur means that he doesn't speak for a month, like a Tainis, a tonus. You know, Tainis, like a Tainis you don't need. It's called Tainis Hadibur. That he doesn't speak for a whole month, except for Divrei Torah. Tainis Hadibur doesn't say anything extraneous. Somebody goes through a month of Tainis Hadibur, he will get Gilei Eliyahu. We found that a sefer.
What?
Gilei Eliyahu Hanavi will appear to him. You heard of Eliyahu? Eliyahu will appear to him. It's called Gil Eliyahu. Okay. In olden days, the union from Gil Eliyahu was one of the things that the great tzaddikim merited, that Eliyahu used to come to them and learn with them. Only very big tzaddikim. Only big tzaddikim, right? The Arizal learned with Eliyahu. So I guess this is a very special. Anyway, so he learned in the Sefer that somebody goes through a month of Tainis Adibur, he will have Gil Eliyahu. So he comes to the Yabta, and he says, I did exactly what it says, and I didn't get Gil Eliyahu, and therefore I am kind of disappointed in this Sefer. So the Abder talks to him, what happened? What did you do? He talks to him about his Tainis Adibur and all that. And as he's doing that, he's taking him out of the house. He's taking a walk with him. He's walking with him. Finally, he walks into the horse's stable. You know what a horse stable is? Everybody knows what a horse is? Everybody knows what a horse is. It's a miracle. He walks with him into the horse's stable, walks up to a horse, and starts caressing the horse. The horse has a mane, caressing the horse on his head, like making him nice and all that. The Sid is standing there and he says, what's going on? Finally he says to him, what are you doing? He says, this horse hasn't spoken for a whole month. He must have Gil Eliyahu. So I'm caressing his head. It's a holy head. It's Gil Eliyahu. In other words, we're not talking about a horse abstaining from speech. We're talking about a Yid who has done all the Avodah possible prior to all the Shiguf. All the avoida, all his labor, all his spiritual work, internally, with himself. And then he sees something holding him back, and he recognizes that is because he's still steeped a little bit too much into certain previous experiences, and he has to break away from them, and therefore he goes and he fasts, or shigufim, that's called shigufim. He does fasting and things like that with a very determined and very measured manner. And while he is fasting, he's not playing golf, but he is learning and davening. Then it's a meaningful thing. And he gets extricated and gets purified and elevated. But all purification and elevation does not occur by the fasting itself. It occurs by the fact that he has freed himself from his gashmis indulgence, and that's why, and therefore he is able to rise and to understand and to relate to a higher spiritual idea. So coming back to us ourselves over here and reflecting on all the various things that we do and we try to accomplish. Sometimes we come, we sit down, learn a piece of Chumash, a piece of Gemara, a piece of Chassidus, and it just doesn't enter my head. I can't relate to it. It's just so foreign to me, I can't relate to it. We have to understand and remember that this does not at all mean that it has no connection to you, that you're not capable of breaking through and getting to know it. Because every Yid has a neshama, and every neshama can relate to every aspect of Torah. Not only can relate, but should relate. Everyone at his level. But if it is determined that this is something which is at my level and I should be able to learn it, I should be able to sense it, then we have to, the answer is, we have to put in more effort. What kind of effort? The effort is to fight off laziness, fight off the self-interest. Like one learns a piece of Gemara. We are used to coming from the outside world, that everything that I study, I can immediately see where that applies in the world. If I learn mechanics, I know how to make a car. If I learn finance, I know how to make money. Something that I'm going to gain from. I learn a piece of Gemara, and I don't see how I'm going to benefit from this learning this Gemara. I'm not going to get a diploma. I'm not going to get 3 letters behind my name. I'm not going to be able to make money with it. And this knowledge itself, I don't see how that will benefit me. We have to know and understand that when we learn Torah, piece of Gemara, the very fact of us going through this piece of Gemara and understanding what the Gemara says, that experience itself is already a refining force. Already, in order to understand the piece of Gemara, it has to take us out of the simple physical world and give us a perspective that is based on a different type of world. A perspective that has a godly underpinning, a godly principle. The Gemara says that a person, that in the proper way, a person should learn Torah Lishma. Anybody know what Torah Lishma means? Torah Lishma means to learn Torah in order, Lishma, for the name of Torah. In other words, in order to reveal in Torah the godliness that's in Torah. The Shema Torah, there are different levels of Lishma. Why, if a person learns Torah not for Lishma, he learns Torah because he wants to be appreciated, he wants to show off. The Gemara says a person should learn Torah for whatever reason. Even if he learns Torah shaloi lishma. Why? Because mitoich shaloi lishma bo lishma. That by learning Torah shaloi lishma, from the learning shaloi lishma, he will eventually come to learn Torah for the real reason. How is that? The reason that happens is because even to simply understand a word of Torah requires to reveal and to relate to a neshama concept. And once a person experiences this neshama concept, then it draws him more and more. And it purifies his whole thinking process. And he sees a completely different world. So that the effort that we invest in learning, it is not just torturing ourselves and forcing myself to do what I don't want. It is a very fruitful and meaningful effort to reveal, to strengthen my intellectual insight, so that I'm not limited to understand only that which can be evaluated physically, but something that is just a conceptual, that has a godly principle in it, that reveals the neshama in the person. This experience of a neshama, for a person to experience the inyan, that there is a real life in the person, that he is not limited just to physical experience, but that a godly concept is also something real to him. This is what carries a person through his whole life. This is what enables a person to go through the whole world and stand up to any challenges in life. Because the world is always going to present challenges. And in order for us to rise above it, we have to have the spirit which rise. Otherwise we fall into it. So that simply learning Gemara and simply learning Chumash and learning Chassidus, just as the Rebbe says, and we know from Halacha, when a person puts on tefillin once, he's not the same person he put on tefillin once. When a person learns a piece of Torah once and he understands it from a Torah perspective, he is not the same person anymore. His mind is different. He has opened up a certain window to a truth that he hasn't known before, and that keeps him going. That gives him life, and enables him to be able to stand up to any challenge. And this is what we're doing here. Not just to get some practical advice how to do things. It is to break through our total attachment, total definition of our lives based on the physical world, and to find some other insight, some other meaning. This puts us in line for real life and enables us to, Mitzvah Hashem, to build a Jewish home and to raise a family and to do all the things that any human being hopes to do. And ultimately to do Avodas Hashem truly, to be true Yidden, and ultimately to bring Mashiach. This is it for today, gentlemen.
Just curious, in the beginning, you made it sound like this entire idea of any type of punishment of the body or any type of self-affliction is unequivocally not the derech of Aveda in terms of Judaism and Torah. And then it seems but if it's the right person and it's the right circumstance, then
not for the purpose of infliction. Like the Alter Rebbe says that the Gemara says Chacham, they used to delay their meal for an hour. That wasn't the purpose of infliction.
No, but that's not. I mean, when we say, I mean, in my mind, when we talk about seguping, we're talking about something more than a scapia. Like they used to fast until their teeth turned black. Or it says the story I once heard about.
Why do people sit like in?
No, wait a second. The fast until the teeth turned black was not that he was waiting till the teeth turned black, and that's how He determined that he has to fast 40 fasts. As a result of that, he felt. As a result of that, his teeth turned black. Not that he was waiting until he got sick.
But nevertheless, I mean that's inflicting damage to the body. Or because I heard once a story about the Shmuel Monk, I'm sure he's not the first. That on Tisha B'Av he went and he sat on a pile of ants. So that seems like infliction for the sake of infliction.
What do you think was in his mind to do this? He felt, I'm just surmising, okay? He felt that his body, dealt with it, that his body was so thick that he did not really sense the union of Churma Bayis. It didn't really hit him in the purity that it should. So how do you break through that? If you can overcome the pain that inflicted on your body, you can overcome it, then what do you become aware of? You're not aware of the body, you become aware of your spirit. And therefore you become aware of the. Ultimately, it is all turned towards revealing some spiritual quality, not just to cause the suffering. You understand? Not suffering for the sake of suffering. The Rebbe Rashabtaki says that there is a difference. I have to say the used words, and I'm trying to. There's a difference between fasting and daven. Rebbe Rashab said that.
I mean, I think I read it just the last week in
you fast from that, maybe the Rebbe repeated it, and
someone was sitting at the fish of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he wasn't eating, or maybe he says it about his father.
Okay. Well, fasting means that he is fasting with some determined purpose. Some determined purpose. Daven means he is, I'm also joining the crowd. I'm also torturing myself. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about at all. In order to fast, you have to really know what you're doing. And have a clear aim and know that where you're trying to get and how to get there. Otherwise, it's like this horse not talking. The horse doesn't become human because he is walking through snow and ice, and it doesn't become. Nothing happens to the horse. So there is inflicting pain for its own sake is really not a Torah way at all.
What about, like, for instance, in the land of Greek, it brings us a story about the Torah.
Polish.
And he's like basically like mortification all day and all night long. So it's seeming that it doesn't all convey that that's the proper derech in the Veda, but nevertheless, it makes it seem like it was a trend which was prevalent, and especially when you read.
My dear friend, in that letter, and if you know in general, there were Prussian who were appropriately so. If you read in the Zichronis, there's a Porush over there.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah, but these are unique people. He was a Porush, and he wasn't telling himself inside, I'm a Porush. He was a Porush, you know what I'm saying? But when one is a Porush, and he knows that he's a Porush, that's contrary to that's also Poshut also. And as a matter of fact, the Prussian that we learn about, these were people who had holy sparks. They were not great scholars. As scholars are not allowed to be approached because he has to learn and teach. They were simple people. Something hit them and they saw something happen, There's a story, I don't know if it's true, but I believe it's true because that's the way it's related, that there was this man who became in the Russian army, became some kind of a big captain in a ship or whatever it is, big thing. No, a big general, something else. He became a big general in the Russian army, and he was being honored. And during this whole process of being honored, something he remembered, his childhood and all that, and he realized, where did he go? He was a very gifted man, but how do I end up over here? This is so vain and so nothing. So he dropped all his medals and all his decorations and escaped and became a Polish. He became a Polish in order to cleanse all of that dirt that accumulated on him over these years. It's not,
So where you do find these occurrences in Judaism is strictly for the sake of the spiritual benefit which is gained from whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
Is Wahabda to compare it to the various ways, which is mortification for the sake of mortification.
Of course, the Goyim, if you know, they actually believe that this world is a torture chamber. In order to get to get saved, whatever the Mishagas. They don't believe that. They believe that this is Hashem's world, and the real Gilui of the person will be in this world. Is in this world.
Can I ask you a quick question? Sure. It's private.
Private.
It's not a long position.